Hi everyone. It's a full blood moon tomorrow morning, and I just wanted to get this video out. I've been really crazy with my personal life, and I just want to apologize. I usually do my classes every 2 weeks, and I wanted to do the class about the Kabbalah and just, showing you guys all the graphs that I had made and charts that I had made to help you decode the Kabbalah tree and get into the tarot cards. And I was going to do a decode with you guys in the class on the Ripple song from the Grateful Dead. But as I was searching the Grateful Dead, I noticed that there was something with Jerry Garcia's death to do with the blood moon. So I want to go into that. I also want to go into how the moon affects the tides of the oceans. And my last class, I did all on the moon phases and the mythology of the different phases of the moon and how that all ties into the pagan holidays and how it represents the journey of ourselves. Okay, so, and there's a manuscript that goes with that class. And I just want to put this together because this moon information started popping in my head before this blood moon. And I wanted to present this to you and show you the difference between the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse and how that affects the oceans and how it affects our bodies and which one is stronger. Okay, so that's something that I've been kind of searching for years now, trying to figure out, is the blood moon more important than the eclipse or vice versa? And so this video is showing you the effects of the two and which one is stronger. So if you awaken tomorrow at 5:15 and you go out and you look to the west, you'll see the blood moon, and it's in conjunction with Uranus, which is heaven. It's also a lot to do with changes and lots to do with rebellion, for fighting for freedom. Right? And this is happening in Aries, the crown chakra. And oh yeah, I forgot to put this in the slide, but if you go and look at Elon Musk's Halloween costume, he's wearing a red costume with the horns, the ram on it. Okay, so I don't know if he did that deliberately for this blood moon, possibly so. So I hope you guys get to see it tomorrow morning. And let's get into some of these slides here. So this is where it's explaining that Jerry Garcia, on his death, his ashes were spread in India on a lunar eclipse on April 4th, 1996. So it's not, so, just from that, I realized, symbolically, it's not an ominous thing, the blood moon. It's actually a spiritual, kind of like the full mother coming into her fullness. Okay, that's really what a blood moon is. It's the fertility of the moon coming into being, almost like a rose, right? It's going from white to red. Okay, and so we get the war of the roses, the symbolism of that, the two, but it's really to do with the full moon. So here in the Hindu website, Hinduism, the moon has great significance. It represents many aspects of creation, life, moral existence. It also symbolizes many aspects of Hinduism, such as the Vedic deities, Sama. Sama, is to do with the dream state, the Sama ritual and ancestral world. Okay? So it's all about your past lives and your ancestors, right? The planetary god by the same name, the eye. So this is what I'm going to get into in this video, is all to do with the eye and the vortex and how that ties into the new moon. Okay, so it's just like there's symbolism here, and all the symbolism that we see is tied to the planets. So the more I'm getting into the moon mythology, the more I realize all the symbols are showing us is just literally about the moon. Okay, so the mind, the rebirth, a king, time. So it's to do with time. Okay? It's to do with rebirth, a jewel adorning the head of Shiva, and most importantly, decay. So it's like, you're transforming, right? You're decaying, and then there's a rebirth. And it's to do with the king. But the eye is what I'm going to get into. Okay, the eye of the vortex is really symbolic. So the Vedics contain description of them either as divinities or their aspects. The Vedic people noticed the moon suffered from regular waxing and waning, right? That's the waxing as the moon grows to the full moon, the waning as it goes into the new moon, while the sun remained constant. Hence, for them, the sun symbolized permanence and immortality, while the moon represented recurrence, repetition, rebirth, and the world of ancestors, to which souls that were destined for transmigration went. Okay, so your soul, the moon, I still see the moon as in the Truman Show, when they're all sitting in this kind of satellite watching him. That's what I feel like we're in, and the moon is like, this ship, and it's watching us. And I do kind of think they're showing us that that's where your memory gets wiped, and but it belongs to the mother. The mother is Cancer, represents the moon, right? And it's funny because that's the gateway of man. So you come into this world by the moon, by Cancer, the manger of Christ. The Hindus have believed that the fortnightly cycle of the moon exerts a great influence on the human anatomy. So it affects your body, just as it affects the water bodies on Earth in cycles of the tides. During a full moon, which is a blood moon, right? It's happening. Go outside right now, you're going to see a full moon, but tomorrow morning it'll be blood red. A person may tend to become restless, irritable, and ill-tempered, showing signs of behavior that hints to lunacy, the term derived from the Latin word for the moon, luna. In Hindu practice, there are specific rituals for the new moon and full moon days. So the Vedics describe the moon as a vessel which contains the mysterious Sama drink. Now, this is really funny because in the Chinese mythology, they have the rabbit mixing the elixir of life, the nectar of the gods, right? So I didn't know this in the Hindu. They also have the moon with the Sama drink. Okay? Sama in Greek means the body. So it's a drink of the body. Okay? It was drunk by the worshippers PM specific occasions to enter altered states of consciousness and to communicate with gods and celestial beings. Vedic people compares him to the king Sama, the lord of Sama juice. Okay? He is extolled as a companion of Indra, beloved the Sama sacrifices, and lord of the heaven. In Hindu literature folklore, the moon is associated with romance, loneliness, friendship, pleasant nights, and kingship. The children of India, the moon is close relation from their mother's side and called Shanda Mama. This is assuring presence in the night sky, serves as a soothing distraction for the disturbed children. Depending upon its size and position in the sky and among the planets, the moon is viewed as auspicious or inauspicious. So the waxing moon, like I said, it's when the moon grows to become the full moon, is considered beneficial, whereas the waning moon, harmful. The waning moon is when you're going into your inner work, right? You're going into where there's no moon in the sky, and that's all to do with your inner journey. And it can be painful, right? It's not easy. So I just wanted to get back to Jerry Garcia. Now his last album was a Hindu album, and his friend with his wife took him to India, his ashes, and spread them there on April 4th, 1996. Okay, but the blood moon was actually on April 3rd, okay, the evening before. So they spread his ashes just after the blood moon. And this is tying into the tides. Okay, so when the ocean tides, everybody thinks, oh, it's the full moon. And the new moon, that's when the tidal changes happen, but it's actually a little bit after, right? So it's not exactly when it's at the same time. So it's interesting where it is. It's, you know, getting close to the Spica star, which is the Washington Monument, you know, which is represents to me the tree. Okay. It's like the mask of the ship, you know, that obelisk. It's like, yeah. So anyhow, it's just, it's, to me, it's a sigillaria tree, but it's symbolic that, you know, that they spread his ashes at this time. So the day that they spread his ashes, the moon was right on Spica. So if you know how the lunar eclipse works, okay, just in case you don't, okay, the moon travels around the earth, and when the earth is between the moon and the sun, that's when you get the blood moon. It's really what they say is the shadow of the earth is creating the redness on the moon. Okay, so the shadow from the sun's light creates this. When you have a solar eclipse, the moon is here between the earth and the sun, and therefore we're on the dark side of the moon. And so that ties into Pink Floyd's song and the eclipse song, and it's being the dark side of the moon is basically an eclipse. So the role of the sun also has a gravitational pull on the earth. The sun does, okay? So when the sun is lined up with the moon and the earth, it helps the moon pull on the earth and the tides become more extreme. So anytime there's an eclipse, when the moon is between the earth and the sun, that's more of a pull. Okay? So it's coming from the sun. And then when it's a lunar eclipse, when the earth is in the middle, right? That creates a pull as well. Okay, so when the sun is not aligned up with the moon and the earth, and in particular, it cancels out the pull of the moon, and the tides are less extreme. So when you have like a quarter moon or a three-quarter moon, you don't have the same tidal effects. Tides and water levels. Now, this is really interesting because they're talking about the 24-hour solar day, but then it's saying here it's 50 minutes off. So a lunar day, also known as a tidal day, is the time it takes for a specific site on the Earth to rotate from its exact point under the moon to the same point under the moon. Unlike a solar day, however, a lunar day is 24 hours and 50 minutes. So it adds on 50 minutes. The lunar day is 50 minutes longer than a solar day because the moon revolves around the Earth in the same direction that the Earth rotates around its axis. So it takes the Earth an extra 50 minutes to catch up to the moon. So that's really fascinating that, you know, it says high tides occur 12 hours and 25 minutes apart. It takes 6 hours and 12.5 minutes for the water at the shore to go from high to low or from low to high. I just find this all very fascinating. I know if you live by the tides, you probably know all this, but for me, you know, I just find this, that's all math, right? So it's really fascinating because it's just, everything's math. How does the moon affect tides differently when it is full versus when it is new? This question popped into my head. I was just like, well, which one's stronger, right? Because I'm always trying to figure out between the blood moon and the eclipses, like which is more important. And so there's the answer right here. When the moon is new, so when there's no moon in the sky, right, a new moon, which causes the eclipse, right? It is on the same side as the Earth as the sun, which means that their gravitational influence adds together, causing higher spring tides than when the moon is full. And when the moon is full, it is on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, which means that although the gravitational attractions add up to increase the tides, making spring tides, that's what they're called, spring tides. I don't know why they call them spring tides. It's just when the moon is, you know, in alignment. They do not increase as much as a new moon. So there you go. The new moon, which is an eclipse, a solar eclipse, creates more pull on the ocean than it does on a blood moon. So I've always been kind of aware that the eclipse, is the diamond ring. You see pictures of it sometimes, it just has this little bubble on it, and it's like the wedding, right? But it also took note that it's called a draconic month. It's the dragon, right? So, and it's 29, 27, that's sidereal, so it's almost 28, and synodic month is 29. So then we end up getting 13 months of lunar. Now, what's really crazy, okay, why my life is kind of going crazy right now is that my mother-in-law, my late husband, her house burnt down, and my brother-in-law was in the house with her, and they got out, and then he was diagnosed with cancer, and he died on Halloween, which is, the 10th month, 31st. So you get 131. Well, my late husband died on January 31st, which is 131. And I'm going, what? This is crazy. So 11 times 3 is 33. And I'm going, that's perfect balance. How did they both die on the same numbers? And their uncle died the same day as my late husband. Okay, so I'm kind of like, whoa, there's some karmic thing going on here. But it basically means the number 33. It's pure balance, because the lunar calendar aligns with the solar calendar. It's off only by 2 days every 33 years. Okay, and that's basically pure balance, and that's what a solar eclipse is. A solar eclipse is representing the dark and the light. Okay, so it definitely has more effect because it's the polarity, right? Do you understand that? That's the polarity. It's also the snake eye. It's the dragon's eye. So this is Scylla and Charybdis were mythical sea monsters noted by Homer. Okay, Greek mythology cited them on opposite sides of the Strait of Messina between Sicily and Calabria on the Italian mainland. Okay, so this is basically a whirlpool, which is what happens on these tides. There's these specific locations, there's like 5 of them around the world, where these whirlpools open up on these eclipses, and the lunar eclipse as well. The solar and lunar eclipses, these whirlpools just open up, and they're really dangerous, and people, sailors, don't escape them. They fall into them, and they get, into this vortex, and they get pulled down to the bottom of the ocean. So it kind of reminds me of the sirens, taking you down to the bottom of the ocean, but it's a whirlpool. So there's other, names for this, called on the horns of a dilemma and between a rock and a hard place. These, sayings all come from this thing of it being between a whirlpool and this rock on a narrow strait. And the rock, basically, the sailors get, maybe thrown off the ship, and only a few die. But if they go close to the whirlpool, they all die, right? So it's kind of like this dilemma, which is, what do we do? So, but you just don't go through these straits on this times when, the eclipses are happening. So there's also an ice falls that's named after this whirlpool. I found that interesting. So it's all through our mythology, but this ice fall is in Antarctica. Okay, so they've named it after this. It's like a frozen portion of the ocean that I guess, has this whirlpool in it. So we go back into Odysseus faced both Charybdis and Scylla while rowing through the narrow channel. He ordered his men to avoid Charybdis, thus forcing them to pass near Scylla, which resulted in deaths of 6 men. Later stranded on a raft, he was swept back through the straits and passed near the whirlpool again. So his raft was sucked into the maw, but he survived by clinging to a fig tree growing over a rock over her Okay, so the fig tree, the famous fig tree, right? Saved him. So there's also the mythology to do with the whirlpool and Jason and the Argonauts. So it's all through our culture here. So Charybdis aided her father Poseidon in a feud with her paternal uncle Zeus, and as such helped him engulf lands and islands in water. Zeus, angry over the land she stole from him, captured and chained her to the seabed. And Charybdis was then cursed by the god and transformed into a hideous bladder of a monster with flippers for arms and legs, and an uncontrollable thirst of the sea. It reminds me of Sittis. It was exactly where this, on Sittis's head right now is Aries, which is where the blood moon is. As such, she drank the water from the sea thrice a day to quench it, which created whirlpools. She lingered on the rock with Scylla facing her directly on the other rock, making a strait. So it's always in a narrow passage that these vortexes happen, and they're, so it's dangerous to cross through. In some myths, Charybdis was voracious woman who stole oxen from Hercules and was hurled by the thunderbolt of Zeus into the sea, where she retained her voracious nature. Okay, so there we have this whirlpool. Now, this reminds me of a caduceus. This is what Dan Winters is always talking about, how this caduceus has to come down and kiss another one. And this is what creates pure bliss, when you can get to this place where these vortexes are kissing each other. And so I'm like, okay, this is really bizarre how this is all tying in, right? But it's like the ocean, there's these ships getting spun around it. The ocean is emotion, right? It's just a bunch of emotion. That's where water holds memory. So it's just one big mass of emotion. It just opens up. Look, the ships just sink in. Then it's tied to Moby Dick, which is, I always believe, is tied to Sittis. Okay, and they have it in a vortex trap. Okay, so it's all in our culture. This is also a vortex, but what does that look like to you? Is it Moby Dick's eye, right? It's like, and the ship gets sucked in, Moby Dick. And even Elvis Presley was tied to Moby Dick, and it's like they're just telling us, right? But what is this? What does this look like? An iris? An iris, it's a sun, it's a solar eclipse. Your eye is a solar eclipse. Okay, well, you could say it's a snake eye. Are we part snake? Are we part reptilian? We have a reptilian brain in the back of our head. So, is that what this is all about, right? So I just find this interesting that now we got the iris tied in, and this would be the new moon, your pupil. Okay, so now Iris is a goddess. She's the goddess of the rainbow, but she's the goddess plus the messenger of other gods in the Iliad because of many colors of this eye part. It's all tied in. Your eye is related to this Iris goddess, not Eris, the god of discord. Iris. Okay, Iris is the rainbow. Now they've pulled this in. Yeah, she's pulled in here. Her name, Iridium. Okay, so they've brought it into the periodic table after Iris, the Greek winged goddess of the rainbow and messenger of the Olympian gods, because many of the salts he obtained were strongly colored. So it's colored salts is making the rainbow. Discovery of the new elements were documented into a letter to the Royal Society on June 21st, 1804. Well, that's the summer solstice. Okay, now if you go and watch my class that I did all about the moon cycles, you'll know why the summer solstice and the winter solstice are so important, tying to the moon, okay, not just to the sun. So bringing it, now this is getting into AI, Iridium is a global satellite communication company providing access to voice and data services anywhere on Earth. with its constellations of satellites. So they're like, it's like the fake sky, right? They've got constellations of satellites. Iridium's network connects people and devices in the world's most remote places and close to home. So it's like they're taking Iris, and she's the messenger, and they're using that symbolism to people to communicate. Now it goes back even to Lincoln. There was a representation of this whirlpool with this war that he was having with Jefferson Davis, right? He was the Confederate president, okay, and eventually he, all to do with the American Civil War. Eventually he was captured, okay, and put in prison. And then when he got put in prison, of course, the Pope had to join in there. So it's just fascinating. It's just history repeating itself. So he says, come to me. This is what he sends them. This is what the Pope sends them, Come to me, all you that labor and are burdened, and I will refresh you, saith the Lord. So basically, this duality of us and them, the Pope is saying, you'll be refreshed by the Lord. He gave him a hand-woven crown of thorns associated with the portrait, is often said to have been made by the Pope, but may have been woven by Davis's wife, Verena. Okay, so he gets put in jail. After 2 years of imprisonment, Davis was released on bail for 100,000, which was posted by prominent citizens, including Vanderbilt's. Okay, so this is crazy, right? So it's like the history. Smith was a member of the Secret Six who financially supported the abolitionist John Brown, right? John Brown was how all the Civil War started, because he was fighting for the freedom of the slaves, and then the equal rights and everything. So it's all messed up. It's like the history's all twisted. So Davis went to Montreal, Quebec, which is, where all the patriots came up to Montreal, okay, because it was French, and the French didn't like the British either, okay? But, so it's just like they created drama and polarity, and it's like there is no good and bad side, because it's all like intertwined. You don't even know who's a good guy and a bad guy. So, because you're not supposed to, you're just supposed to realize it's just division, right? So Davis remained under the indictment under Andrew Johnson issued on Christmas Day. So he was released. He had a rebirth on Christmas Day. Okay, so they pardoned him. So anyhow, I just find that all weird, how that's all tied into the mythology of this whirlpool, like stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? That's what all this symbolism is all about. And it's all tied to the moon because of the tidal waves. So these are the locations of the biggest whirlpools. The old Sow, though, is in Canada off the coast of New Brunswick. Okay. Besides, it also has these piglets. They call it piglets, small, medium whirlpools surrounding the old Sow. Okay, off the coast of Brunswick. This one, Norway. But Edgar Allan Poe wrote a short story all about the one in Norway. But the funny thing about it is, supposedly, if you get stuck in one of these vortexes and you're in a ship, if you don't panic, you get out. You don't get sucked in. Okay, so it's like you got to just stay calm and cool and collected, and that's what they're explaining here. As long as you stay in control and you keep a cool head, you'll get out of it. You'll survive it. So here, my pronunciation is going to be off on this, I'm sure. It's the Moss Stroman was described in the 13th century in the Old Norse poems of the Edda. Okay, these are very important poems. And this is what Tolkien was researching for the Lord of the Rings. Everything was relating to these poems, and remained an attractive subject for painters and writers, including Edgar Allan Poe. Well, of course, right? Jules Verne. This is all to do with the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, And they got Moby Dick in here. See, I knew it. It was all tied. It's always tied to Moby Dick. It comes back all the time. Moby Dick. All these famous movies and stuff. I had a really weird experience when I was in Disneyland, and I was in the old ride of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and they turned it into Finding Nemo. And you have to go into a submarine, and we're all standing in there. And as soon as I saw Nemo, I started to go green. I almost passed out. Somebody said to me, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No," but it's like my subconscious was telling me to pay attention. This is really important. But it keeps popping up. See, so we've got it back here again, Moby Dick. So one of the first scientific descriptions of this whirlpool was presented by the Norwegian priest and poet Petter Dass in his poem, The Trumpet of Nordland. Now we got the trumpet in there, the trump. Okay, so there he clearly related the whirlpool with tides by noting that it was the strongest at full and new moons and the weakest at the half moon. And we know that. But they have a picture here, and it's the serpent, the dragon. Okay, and this is Edgar Allan Poe's descent into the maelstrom. You have to read his little short story because he mentions the rainbow. So Iris, right? He mentions the full moon as well. Okay, so they code these poems with esoteric knowledge. So I'm convinced that the serpent in the water is these tidal, anomalies that happen. So it's like whirlpools, eddies, all these things that happen. It's the serpent. So yeah, and this is the ship going in, and the story is really cool because the guy got out, okay, to tell the story, and he's talking about what he experienced, and his brother is not making it. So yeah, these are called tidal eddies and whirlpools. Now, eddies are not really whirlpools. Basically, the water goes backwards. Okay, so it goes back in time. That's what an eddy is. And I mention Edgar Allan Poe again. Yeah, here it's saying an eddy is a current of air or water running back or in an opposite direction to the main current, while a vortex is a whirlwind. The Naruto whirlpools, this is in Japan. The current in this strait is the fastest in Japan and the fourth fastest in the world after the Saltstraumen outside of Bodo in Norway, which reaches speeds of 37 kilometers an hour. And then they talk about the old Sow whirlpool in New Brunswick. Okay? So this is what they look like. Imagine going by one of those. It's like, whoa, no thanks. Okay, and this is, I guess, more like an eddy. Things are just, or maybe that is a whirlpool, but things are just moving backwards and stuff. It's fascinating. So they've even linked it into climate change. So whirlpools and climate change. Recent research reports suggest that whirlpools and maelstroms in oceans influence the climate over land. As already known, the precipitation and transfers of heat of water currents have an important role to play in determining the temperatures on land. Similarly, giant whirlpools and maelstroms carry huge volumes of water and transmitting heat across the oceans also might be responsible for changes in weather patterns in different parts of the world where they are found. So then, let's go to do this video. And they're talking about Trump's second term as president would plunge the EPA, which is an environmental institution there, into alternate universe. Okay, so I'm just like, what are we doing? Are we going into this crazy vortex? Like, and here they have the Golden Gate Bridge, and then there's disaster. It's like they're just telling you right here. It's like a joke. Like to me, it's like it's just polarity. Which way are you gonna go? It's all to do with the trumpet, and it's hilarious. But the point is, it's all to do with your inner work. And just to know that the eclipse, the solar eclipse, has more pull on you than these blood moons. Okay? And the polar eclipse, the solar eclipse, sorry, is more to do with rebirth. Okay? And then the blood moon is to do with, coming into fruition. It's like you're coming into your fullest potential. Okay, so this is how it affects your emotions. Now, because it's in Aries, this one is a little bit more dramatic. Okay, because the Aries represents the god of war, but it's the war within you. It's the war within you that, between your ego and your soul, the one that wants to be right and the one that wants to, you know, uh, it's just your ego. You have to let go of your ego and just go, okay, it's not about right and wrong, or I have to convince people that I'm right. It's more about just seeing the polarity and not being attached to it, right? It's like, it's so hard. It's not easy to do, but you have to do that inner work. So that's what I hope everybody can do on this blood moon. I think it's really important that it's, on the crown chakra. Now you got to remember, Mars rules Aries. Mars also rules the eighth house of transformation, which rules your sacral, your Scorpio Ophiuchus area through your hips, which is the beginning of your Kundalini energy. And he also rules your crown chakra, which is, your Kundalini energy, where it has to go. So Mars, he's good because he's active. He creates energy that awakens. It's like it stirs you up, right? It's you have to be stirred up to awaken. So, anything to do with your body, moving that energy, like spinning and twirling and rotating back and forth, or even just, rolling, on your back and forth, where you're creating that energy to move, is really important. And it would be beneficial to do on these blood moons. This one. Okay, now we don't get another one until Pi Day. This is a total lunar eclipse, and we don't get another one until Pi Day. So please like and subscribe, share my videos, try to help people learn about the wonderful world of sidereal astrology and also the esoteric meaning of it. I think it just gives us such joy when we really understand, how the symbols rule this world and what they really mean, and to get out of the fear of the polarity of each symbol. So yeah, I appreciate your support, and I will be in touch for the next class. I got a little bit of a busy week looking after a family member, so if you can um, stay tuned and also check out the school, and I appreciate all your support. I'm still available for readings, so yeah, it's gonna get crazy. I think, we're just getting into more and more um, the pendulum moving back and forth. Right now, it's kind of going more in the United States, more to the red, and it's gonna, it's just trying to see who's gonna keep hanging on to that pendulum, or do you want that pendulum to balance in the middle, and find that inner balance within our society, and just create the new world, right? Which is all out of love. So take care. Enjoy the blood moon.